My name is Carrie. I'm with Intensive Family Support Services of Sussex County, and this is a program of the Mental Health Association of Essex and Morris, which, don't be fooled by the name, we are in other counties. I work locally in Newton and on Spring Street, and we have services also in Passaic County. And we are, I'm here to talk to you today about another role that I play, the mental health first aid instructor. We are a countywide program. We are able to provide this service in lots of different areas. Okay. Would you like me to get right into the, did you want me
I'll do a couple of housekeeping things if I can, Carrie. Thank you so much. We are delighted to have you for lunch today. We like to, as you know, Family Partners. This is our weekly Lunch and Learn program where we are happy to have you here and have some time with an expert. And Carrie could be an expert on many different topics, but today she's here to talk to us about mental health first aid and how to be a first responder. So I'm going to remind you that we're fine if you keep your camera off. We know that many of you are multitasking and maybe having lunch, but we're happy to see your smiling faces when we're able. And I would also invite you to utilize the chat function. If you have a question that Carrie hasn't gotten to or a thought you wanted to share, utilize the chat. And Carrie has allowed for time at the end of her presentation to hit upon any topics that we didn't or any questions that you might have. So this is your program, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us. So Family Partners would like to turn it over to Carrie Parmelee.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen and show you what I have to offer today from the beginning. Okay. Whoops, excuse me. Go back to the first slide. Let me just tell you a little bit about mental health first aid. And let me get rid of this bar on top so you can see it a little bit better. That should do it. And that middle one should go away. So I'm a mental health first aid instructor, and as you can imagine, that's been hard to teach over the past year or so during the pandemic. So our agency is the Mental Health Association of Essex and Morris, has trained our team of instructors to become virtual instructors as well. And that has just rolled out in our agency. And we're working out some kinks, but we've started a course that was provided in January and will continue to do so. And so I'll let you know at the end a little bit more about if you have further interest in learning more or becoming an instructor. This will kind of be an infomercial about that. And it will also give me a little time to practice the new slides on you today, because I've picked out a few that are highlights that are like, I feel are the most pertinent things to do when you're assessing a situation that could need help. It might not necessarily be a crisis, or it might be, and what all those forms of crisis could be when it comes to mental health. So the first thing I really wanted to say was that the mental health first aid is a worldwide program that has been started in Australia, and in the United States, there's been 2.5 million people taking the course already. And so it's really, really widespread, but we're hoping, our goal is that it becomes as widespread as CPR and first aid courses, because everyone knows that those are some basics of how to help someone in a medical crisis, right? So, so without really getting too much into the details, I want to let you know that I'm here to just present to you some highlights of that, and really give you, whether or not you want to be a certified instructor, give you some pointers on what might help when you encounter someone you care about or someone you don't know having some mental health challenges, okay? So, when we talk about mental health, these are some signs we all experience. We all might have some early signs under stress, right? And it's usually in the form of a behavior, like something might start happening for us, we showing up late or having personal inability to keep our personal and professional appointments and activities, or it might be the way we look. we might look tired or disheveled, or other people can notice something about us at first. So these are the early signs. It might be a mood that indicates to someone else that we are sad, or that we're worrying, our anxiety is kicking in. We might no longer participate in the activities that we want. We might have difficulty concentrating when we're doing our work or our school. So we become quite indecisive sometimes when we're having early signs. And these are things you can see in yourself, or you could see in someone else. It's a lot harder to see in ourselves, though, I think you might agree. So the mental health first aid worldwide has come up with an action plan called Algae in order to respond to those early warning signs, or even a worsening warning sign, which we'll talk about too. And that includes the first step of Algae being assess or approach. Assessing or approaching someone who's either and deciding whether they're at risk of suicide or harm to themselves or someone else, and then assisting them. So that's the A in Algae, is assess, approach, assist. Okay. And then, oops, excuse me, going the wrong direction. Technical challenges I'm having today. Let's do L. Come on.
You're demonstrating resilience and persistence and strength.
Oh, goodness. So yeah, I told you I'm practicing these slides on you. These are new slides that were developed when we did this virtual certification. So please bear with me. Okay. My computer the buttons are like not working properly. Here we go. Okay, so the reason it's in a circle here is because Algae is not step by step. You don't assess and then listen non-judgmentally and then give reassurance and information and then encourage professional help and then encourage self-help, but it's a circular motion. You might want to use one level of Algae and then go back to the other. But let's go through what it means. Assess and then listen non-judgmentally is something that we will talk about in a minute. Giving reassurance and information is what G stands for. Encouraging appropriate professional help is the first E, and the second E is encouraging self-help and other support strategies. So it's not linear. It's something that we're gonna keep doing according to the situation that we're in. So at first, assessing for risk of suicide or harm is the first crisis you might be looking at is, what is the person experiencing? Using your skills to assess that. Some of those crises that you might encounter are panic attacks, aggressive behaviors, substance misuse, following a traumatic event. Somebody often will have a crisis occur. Or it might not be immediately following, it might be later after the event has occurred. They might be reliving that event, and that might be a crisis that's going on. Or this might be a non-suicidal self-injury. Somebody might be having, besides suicide, somebody might be having a non-suicidal self-injury pattern where they're cutting themselves or injuring themselves. And we'll talk about that today too. Immediate crisis that you want to be looking at while you're assessing is the medical emergency or the suicide thoughts. If those behaviors that you might be non-suicidal self-injury, are they leading to suicidal thoughts and behaviors? That's one thing we're looking at. And alcohol and drug use can be, add to the crisis. And there's also a crisis of severe psychotic states that we're going to talk about very briefly today. And this is a lot of information for me to get through, but I promise I'll try to do my best. So in a non-crisis situation, you want to plan to talk privately about your concerns with the person and find a place that's really, find a place that is really not a distraction to the person. You might want to open up. They might not be able to open up until they see and feel that you care and you can show them that. A person might downplay what they're going through to avoid upsetting you. So it might be really important to let them know that you're there for them and that you have the time. Let the person know that you're ready when they are, but don't pressure them to talk right away. And then listening non-judgmentally, we want to pay attention to not only what the person's saying verbally and how they are saying it, their tone of voice, but also some nonverbal cues. So keep in mind that when you're listening, I like to say that listening is the best thing we can do for somebody else. Sometimes we're always worried about what we can say and how we should respond verbally to them. But I like to say that we have 2 ears because it's harder to listen than it is to talk. We only have one mouth. So we have to really practice the listening. It doesn't come naturally. So paying attention and letting them know you're here, maybe a practice to do when you're trying to listen to someone else is to really repeat what you think they're saying rather than trying to give them a solution or advice about what they're saying. This might validate how they're feeling, and it gives you a chance to understand whether what you heard is really what they meant to say. Because a lot of times people aren't really using the words they intend to when they're stressed. Okay. And what is reassurance and information? The G part, giving reassurance and information. Reassurance is a statement or commitment that action and that the person, helps them remove their fears. It's an action or a statement that helps them remove their fears. The information is helping them understand a concept. Okay. What's the difference though between reassurance and advice? You know, sometimes people are not asking for the actual solution. Sometimes they're just needing some help in the direction that they need to go, and we need to give them facts rather than telling them what we think they should do, right? So reassurance, here's some examples I wanted to give you. Reassurance, what it sounds like and what it doesn't sound like, okay? It doesn't sound like, I remember when I had a breakup, I just threw myself into work. What you should do is this. That's not reassurance. That's really like, it's kind of an invalidating statement. We want to show empathy and we want to show them that the emotions are real, right? And not jump to solutions, because our solutions may not be what they need. So saying something like breakups can be tough, it's natural for you to be hurt and upset might be a lot more reassuring. And so the other example I wanted to give is you really need to talk to a professional about that. That might be something we want to say because it may be really good advice, but they might not be ready to do so. And this may feel to them as if we're jumping to a conclusion. So saying, I'm here for you if you want to talk. There are also people who are trained to help and work out these feelings for you. If you want to talk to someone, that might be a better way to give them reassurance. So, and then saying you'll get over it, just don't worry about it. That's something that we might say, you know, a lot of times when we're trying to reassure somebody, we're trying to say, this is going to pass. It's not a big deal, and trying to give them positive reinforcements or positive assurance. But it's better to just let them know that they're not alone, because we don't know if they're really going to get over it. And telling them not to worry about it is a little too much of a simplification of their problem. So we want to be sure we're giving them empathy and reassurance when we use this step in Algae. Another one is the way you're handling this isn't healthy. That might be better said by saying, I care about you. I've noticed a change in how your mood is, or how much you're eating, or when maybe they're not eating at all, or maybe they're eating too much. You can just recognize what you notice and let them know that you care, as opposed to judging, adding the judgment piece, because we want to remember to not do that, because that will discourage them from opening up and talking to you again. So in the professional help step, the first E, encouraging appropriate professional help, we want to use any of these professionals in mental health that somebody might be open to doing. It's not just one option. There are medical doctors, or psychiatrists. There are advanced practitioners like nurses that can help someone with medications. There are psychologists. Now, psychologists are therapists and social workers are also therapists. Psychologists have a different way of doing therapy, slightly a different training than social workers. And then other counselors and therapists might be different professional. There might be licensed social workers. There might be licensed counselors. There's a lot of different licenses out there and approaches to therapy. I encourage people who are looking for therapists to go on a search engine on Psychology Today, which is a really popular one, and a lot of local therapists are registered there. It gives them the different types of therapy that are available and their approach to therapy that they take. So you can filter by gender, you can filter by insurance, you can filter by a lot of different things on that kind of on that website. And there's other resources too to identifying therapists. And then there's crisis support specialists. We have our local psychiatric emergency services. We have national suicide hotlines. There are text lines. There's a lot of resources out there. I don't have them in the slideshow today, but if you're interested in those resources, websites, and hotline numbers, I can definitely forward those over to you, and you can email them out to participants. And then, of course, substance use professionals, there's the whole field of those. And in both substance use and mental health, there are certified peer specialists that can also be of use in helping someone feel like they're not alone, because the peers themselves are in recovery from mental health or substance use disorders. So that's a very popular way right now to help folks who, need to feel accepted. And then there's different types of professional treatment I just wanted to highlight. And those treatments include individual therapy, family therapy, group therapy, like intensive outpatient programming, there's medications, and there's rehabilitation programs that might also be full day programs or inpatient. So let me get to the more important pieces here. What if the person doesn't want any help? What do we do? What if the person you're talking to says, no, I'm not ready to do any of that. What should I do to help them? You can encourage them to talk to someone they trust. Is there someone in their life, especially if it's a youth, you want to encourage them to talk to someone they trust that is a trusted adult. Trusted adults in someone's life is really important and a protective factor for young people. Never threaten the person with hospitalization or any punitive action. Always encourage them that if they don't, get help, they might someday feel like talking about it, and you can encourage them that you'll be here, you'll be patient, and if they ever need your help in the future, you'll be around. Okay. Then the last E in Algae is encouraging self-help and other support strategies. What is self-help? We all like to think of it as self-care too. In the end, I'm going to encourage you all to use some of these strategies on yourself to cope with the stress of being a caregiver or a teacher or a counselor or a mother or a father, okay? So self-help is when a person uses their own efforts and resources to cope with challenges and achieve mental health well-being. It's really important for all of us to practice this. Not every person is ready or willing to try it, but some of the ways that people do practice self-help include these coping strategies: exercise, relaxation and meditation. There are peer support groups. This is something very widely used in different mental health and non-mental health settings. We use those in our family support groups at Intensive Family Support. Then there are self-help books and social networks and hobbies that people use to try to de-stress and cope and move on from any stressors in their lives that are becoming difficult for them. So now I'm going to get back into assessments. And if you use the Algae, the first step of Algae in mental health first aid, if and when you ever want to become a mental health first aider, we would go into a lot more deeply about what to do when crises occur, but I'm going to give you some of the highlights today. Mental health first aid it describes a crisis at a time of intense difficulty, trouble, danger, or distress. It might be mental, emotional, or physical. Different types might be panic attack, aggressive behaviors, substance misuse, and these are some ones on the slide I've covered before. I put this slide back up again because I wanted to review, and I wanted to tell you that I myself is someone who has an anxiety disorder, and I have for years had help from time to time professionally with my anxiety. And a few times I've had a crisis of panic attack. And I found that when I start to develop severe anxiety, panic attacks are an acute form of severe anxiety. And when it starts to happen, it can sometimes feel like a medical emergency. What I felt was a shortness of breath, and I felt a panic, a need to flee or go and hide, and I started to cry. So, you know, what I really needed and what helped me was someone to be there with me, even though I had the need to flee and I had the shortness of breath. So sometimes when someone's having a panic attack, all you need is someone there to reassure you that you're going to be okay. Now, sometimes if you don't know the person or the person's never had one before, you're not sure if the person is having a medical emergency and needs a response from a medical professional. So you want to err on the side of, err on the side of caution and use your judgment to call medical emergency if the person is not able to let you know that this is something they've had before. So the best thing to do when someone's in a crisis of a panic attack is to ask if this has ever happened to you before, if they have any medical conditions that you should be aware of. If they're unable to answer or become non-responsive, of course, it's a medical emergency and you can check to see if there's a medical bracelet indicating any problems they might have, and you can call 911. Okay. So in other crisis situations, I want to go over a few tips for de-escalating a situation that might be escalating with aggression. Okay. One of the things to keep in mind it's really hard to do, but it might help a lot if you can kind of get your own, get in touch with your own presentation. What are you speaking really fast? What is your tone of voice? Are you loud? Are you soft? Trying to keep it even and keep it slow and confident and use a caring tone. Try not to argue with the person or threaten them. If you raise your voice or talk too fast, it might escalate their situation. And then I wanted to give you an example of using positive words instead of negative words. So let's say the person is, becoming angry and is pacing a lot and is saying things that are really disruptive to the people around you or to yourself. And there's conflict. You can predict that conflict can happen. Instead of telling the person you're being really loud, you better stop that screaming and you should just go sit down. Those are negative words. You can say something like, I'm here for you. I can see you're upset. Maybe if we lower our voice, I can hear and talk to you and I can help you a little bit better. So that's an example of positive words as opposed to the negative words. Trying to stay calm and avoid nervous behavior. Don't restrict the person from moving. If the person needs to leave, let them leave. And if you have any concerns, you can always call for professional help. Try to be aware of what might increase the person's fear, because usually if the person's saying things that are angry or aggressive, it's coming from an inner problem of fear. Okay. So they might be afraid of something and you can kind of tap into that. And try not to do anything that would increase that fear in them. Always know that you can pause the conversation and say, let's take a break. Let's talk about this when we both have, caught our breath, and we can talk a little bit more gently or quietly. Okay. So remember, if your safety or the safety of the person or others is at risk, get help immediately. You're never obligated to help a situation if you feel uncomfortable. Okay. And this goes for everyone across the board, but it also goes for you, even if you took the mental health first aid course and become certified, you are not someone who's obligated to act in a situation that you feel you're not equipped to do so. So more about aggressive behaviors. Aggression and violence are not the same thing. So I wanted to make a point to let you know that people with a mental health condition or challenge are more likely to be a victim of violence. So if you're finding someone who's showing signs of a psychotic break or aggressiveness, and you think that there might be a mental health challenge that they're going through, the best thing for you to do is to understand the symptoms they might be going through are symptoms. And we can use those tips that we just went through on the other slide, like staying calm and speaking slowly. Remember that they're not necessarily going to become violent. People vary from state to state, and they're usually operating in a response to fear. So if you can assure them at first that that person's safe and you're not there to hurt them in any way, assure them in some way that you're there to help, and that you ask them what can help them feel better, that's probably the best approach to any situation. Certainly if you see violence, that's when that should end and you need to remove yourself and stay safe, or remove other people, okay, from the situation. But keep in mind that the mental health challenges that people have aren't always the people that have, they're only 4% of the violent crimes that occur that people have challenges. The media really covers this mental health as a cause for violence in very dramatic ways, and it's not always the case. It's a very small percentage of the population. Try not to argue or threaten the person. Try not to argue with what the content of what they're saying. Try not to make any threats of what you will or won't do. And try not to challenge the content of what they're saying. Try to focus on their feelings as opposed to the content that might not be true. You're not going to be able to talk them out of their beliefs, even if they're not true. So the key actions here are to ensure your own safety, to de-escalate the situation, and to connect to professional help if needed. So now let me just cover quickly what a traumatic event might be for someone, and help you recognize that sometimes the crisis the person's experiencing is because of something they just experienced, like an accident, a car accident, or a explosion, or something in the community. Could be, or it could just be something very, very traumatic that they experienced personally. It's any incident experienced by them perceived to be dangerous or threatening, or have a serious injury or death. The traumatic event doesn't necessarily mean the person's at immediate risk. You can intervene with that person, and early intervention is critical. And then sometimes they might not have a response immediately to the crisis. They might not have an emotional or mental challenge that's created from it. They might be weeks later. So ongoing support can sometimes make a difference. If the person is immediately having trouble, determine that they're safe. Make sure that the area is safe before you respond. Check for any potential dangers, and then assure the person that you can attend or get help for them to any personal injuries or basic needs, like food, shelter, and clothing. Just assure them that if you don't have their needs met right now, that you will stay with them and help them find a way to get those needs met. But you also don't want to make promises that you can't keep, that you're not sure about. Making sure that you let them know that you will in time find a way for them to have what they need and their basic needs met. And if the person doesn't want to tell you all about what happened, don't force them to tell them. They might later want to talk about this in the future. So here, the key things are ensuring your safety, making sure the environment is safe, and identifying the person's immediate needs. After the traumatic event, we talked about how things can become more serious later. The person might have an impact about it after the fact. You can offer them options to regain their control. You can encourage the person to tell others what they need, to take care of themselves, to avoid negative coping strategies like alcohol or drugs. You can ask them if they'd like to consider professional help, especially if it's been 4 or more weeks that they're still having reaction to this traumatic event. Let them know you're available to talk whenever they're ready. If not on that day, maybe down the road, and respect their privacy to what they're experiencing right now. It's always important. Potential problems after a traumatic event are panic attacks, severe anxiety, suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and non-suicidal self-injury. So before I talked about my own panic attacks, I had a traumatic event. First of all, I had anxiety in 2020 over this pandemic was heightened like everyone else's. And then I had a traumatic event where my dog bit someone. And one of my triggers is the sight of blood. Okay. So the dog biting someone itself was very traumatic, how, awful I was feeling about the action itself. And then the sight of blood caused me to go into that full-blown panic. So afterwards, it didn't happen right away. I told you I had some, the panic. And then afterwards, I had some ongoing anxiety that became severe. So that experience required me to escalate from the self-help levels of care I was doing all during this pandemic to try to, aid my own anxiety, to professional help. And there's a therapist that I used over the years whenever I had heightened anxiety or events that increased it. And I started doing that again. So this is something, sometimes sharing your own experience with someone who's experiencing something can help them understand, but not telling them the advice to do. Like I wouldn't tell somebody that, oh yes, you should go get therapy. But I would say, this is what I did. And you're not alone. And sending them the message is often, telling them a story is often very comforting and reassuring that they're not alone. So key actions in a traumatic event. If a mental health first aider notices any of these crises, follow the steps specific to any situation. So non-suicidal self-injury, let's talk about that. That's a possible crisis that you might be involved in or might see someone doing. This is where there's deliberate self-inflicted damage to the body, like cutting, for example. But their intent is not to die by suicide. Their intent is to release some of the tension and anxiety they're feeling. Believe it or not, sometimes non-suicidal self-injury, like cutting, actually is described as the analogy of a boiling pot. When you take the lid off, it reduces the boil. So people talk about actually feeling sense of relief after doing things like hurting themselves and self-injuring. We want to make sure that we are not judging. We do want to make sure that we're observing what we might see. If you saw someone with cuts on their arm, you would want to ask about it and say, is everything okay? I noticed these things. Do you want to talk about them? You don't want to ignore them for fear of embarrassment, because the person, it may give them an actual opportunity to talk about something. But if they don't want to talk about it, certainly there's no pressure. But recognize that the way that you offer help for someone who really isn't intending to die by suicide, that the way that you offer help is to talk about what their emotions are about the behavior. Let them tell you, if they tell you why they do it, don't judge that. Don't discourage the actual behavior, but talk about the reasons and talk about the things that they can do to perhaps get support or help for that behavior, as opposed to actually telling them, you can't do that, don't do that anymore, or threaten them if they continue to do it. The reason being is that, those behaviors can sometimes be avoiding, actually helping them avoid thoughts of suicide and actions that are really intended to take their own lives, because they are releasing, they're having that feeling of release we talked about with the boiling pot. Okay. So key action here is address your observations, listen non-judgmentally, and avoid overreacting, but address any medical emergencies. Certainly if the cuts that someone has been doing are too deep and require medical attention, that's what you would encourage. So then there is self-harm that is intended for someone to take their own life. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the warning signs. Some of those can be talking or writing about death or dying or suicide. They could be threatening out loud and verbalizing that they're going to kill themselves. They're looking for ways. They might be seeking access to the means that they can get. They might be stockpiling medications or registering for a firearm. There might be anxiety or agitation that they're showing. They might not have ability to sleep, or they might be sleeping all the time. But the key there is that there's a severe change in sleep. Same thing with appetite. There's a severe change in appetite one way or the other. Either they're not eating or they're eating everything. Feeling no reason for living, saying things like that about their purpose in life are a sign. Feeling trapped, like there's no way out of a situation. They might be thinking that there's no reason for living. And they might be feeling like the bad situation is really, there's no safe way out. So these are some of the things you might hear or see someone talking about or doing. The way to approach this is to stay calm as much as you can and talk with them, speak with them about the observations or the things that they're saying or the writing that you're seeing. Ask about it in a non-accusatory manner, making sure that you appear confident, that you're staying, here it describes the duck on the pond, the calm surface, the padding, being hard internally, but the padding hard internally to determine next actions, okay? Try to understand how you feel from their point of view. And how they feel from their point of view, and tell them to tell you more. Express, tell me more about how this feels. Express empathy and focus on your concern for their safety or well-being, as opposed to the reasons why they're saying they have no reason for living. Because we want to be careful not to judge their reasons, what brought them to this point, because we need to be empathic. We need to show that that their reasons are valid to them, because everybody reacts differently to stress or problems in their life. Instill hope by asking long-term plans or goals and letting them know that the feeling doesn't last forever. This is important. Like, you can recognize that this feeling is real right now and it feels really like there's no way out. But people that get to this point do change in their ideas about whether they can get through it or not. It doesn't last forever. That's the way to give reassurance in this crisis. So the key actions are you thinking about killing yourself? Asking that question directly. There's a myth out there that says when you ask, you're going to be giving the person the idea, and that's just a myth. Asking the question may be the only way we know. Some of these signs might be here, but they might be signs of a worsening depression, but you don't know for sure unless you ask the question. And this might actually be a relief to someone who sees that somebody else really understands how deep and sad I am, really understands how trapped I feel, okay? So asking that question is not going to hurt. It's going to help you gather information and work together to keep them safe for now. Stay with them if they're suicidal, and consider calling a prevention hotline or 911, or coming up with a plan that they're comfortable with. Who do they want to talk to about it? What professional can be called? How will they remain safe? Connect them with the professional. If you don't feel as though you can keep the individual safe yourself, get help immediately. If the person's not really cooperative, they're telling you everything, but they're not willing to do something to stay safe, then you may need to take matters and get help immediately. Take the matter in your own hands. So the steps to assessing risk are, I'm just going to quickly go over those today, because this is not something you are actually required to go through every step, but it's important to know what to do if somebody answers the question yes, right? Are you thinking about killing yourself is what you ask, or are you thinking about suicide? Notice my language. I'm not using the words, every time I talk about suicide, I'm not using the words committed suicide or successful suicide when I talk about it. It's because commit sounds like a crime and success sounds really positive. So whenever we're talking about suicide, we all want to try to catch ourselves and change our language. If you can just, join with me in that effort, it might really help the people who have suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and it'll also help the people who survive the loved ones dying by suicide. So we ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? Sometimes people, you can say, sometimes people who feel as bad as you're telling me, they have these thoughts. Have you had any thoughts of suicide? So that might be the one thing to say at the first step in assessing. So you ask the question, and if yes, you ask about the plan, okay? If the person says they have thought about it, you can say, have you ever thought about what you would do? What is your plan? How would you kill yourself? Or have you ever decided when you would do it? Sometimes people say, I would do it when I lose my job, or I know that, I might lose my job. They might be feeling at risk of it, but if that happens, then that's when I would kill myself. Have you done anything to get the things you need? You would ask that question if they say yes, okay? And if they say yes to that, the next step is, what do we do to keep you safe? Since you have thoughts of doing it, you figured out when you would do it, you figured out how you would do it, how can we keep you safe? And you might want to engage that person in the safety plan. And again, if the person is not willing to engage and you don't feel comfortable leaving them alone without a safety plan, then you would get help immediately and call for professional help. Okay, and I'm going to do a time check real quick here. Okay, 15 minutes left. All right, almost done.
Doing a great job. Doing a great job, Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you. I just lost track of time because I'm not looking at it. So psychosis is another crisis that someone might experience in mental health, okay? Psychosis is not a disorder. Psychosis is a symptom. Psychosis can be for lots of reasons. People can have experienced psychosis because of a mental health condition like schizophrenia. People can experience psychosis because they are on drugs. People can experience psychosis because they're withdrawing from drugs. People can experience it because of dementia. So these are the signs and symptoms. I want to just highlight that there are lots of reasons that we're not able to know. And even if you take the first aid course, you're still not going to know how to assess what reason someone's having these signs and symptoms. Your job is to just see if you can respond and get help for the person. So some early signs of it are isolation and withdrawal, because the person is really feeling that what they're experiencing is out of touch with reality. So they might be avoiding people. They might be confused or disorganized in their speech. It's just not making sense, or it's irrelevant. Again, the changes in appetite can be a sign. Not one of these things is going to be a psychosis sign, but altogether, these might be signs that someone's experiencing that kind of a psychotic break. Decreased work or school performance, a decline in self-care happens, unusual sleep, inappropriate or flat affect, facial expressions is just not matching up for what's happening. And that can sometimes be because they're experiencing internal stimuli, either voices or thoughts that are distracting them, and they're not really paying attention to the environment around them to be able to really have it coincide. Dressing inappropriate for weather because they're really not really, again, experiencing what's in the environment. They're internally feeling a different way. Depression could be pretty evident. It could be anxiety. They could be irritable. They can very commonly be suspicious and not willing to trust you and what your judgment is. So that's really why in the experience of psychosis, you don't want to challenge someone's fears that they might be expressing. You don't want to tell them that they're right or wrong. You just want to talk about how you can help and the emotions they might have. So the content of what they're saying in this kind of episode might be unreal to us, but we don't want to say that's not true. We want to say, you must be afraid. You must be fearful. You know, how can I help you feel more safe? They might have difficulty paying attention. They might express intense or new ideas that we were just talking about, those out of touch ideas, the ones that are real to us, or strange feelings. There's delusions and hallucinations. Now, delusions are something that the person thinks about others or their environment or themselves that isn't real. And hallucinations are things that they're sensing. They're either hearing voices, seeing things, smelling things, all the different senses that we don't share. We don't see the same thing. We don't hear the same thing. Most commonly, it's voices that are the hallucinations that people experience in a mental health challenge, because the voices are the most common symptom, the most common way the hallucinations occur. The others are much more rare. So we never want to challenge what they're telling us. We just want to reassure them in these cases. Psychosis is a syndrome or collection of symptoms rather than a diagnosis, which is what I said when we first got onto this slide. So I'm going to move along. So in a severe psychotic state, a person might be overwhelmed with their delusion. Their speech might be very disorganized and their behavior can become disrupted. They might appear very distressed, and they could also be disturbing others. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're intending to be aggressive. Whatever their delusions or hallucinations or their thoughts are that are disturbing them are really making them uncomfortable, and it makes them interact the way that you see. Individuals in this state can become harmed unintentionally because of these symptoms. So if they're afraid of you and you know, don't know how to make them feel more safe, or you respond to them in a challenging way, that can escalate the situation. So that's one of the reasons why we don't want folks to challenge the content of what the person is saying or experiencing, but to just respond to their actions or their fears and try to help that situation. So how to approach? Try to de-escalate by keeping calm, short, simple sentences, in a non-threatening tone. Talk to them about how they feel, not what they're hearing. If they're telling you they're hearing this or hearing that, just say, well, that must be, you know, guess how they feel, and focus on the fears or what they believe. If the person has an advanced care directive, that's something that mental health first aid talks about, that that might help direct the give a directive and prevent relapse. But that's something that families and the individual can use to follow instructions. You know what advanced directives are for medical health? Well, psychiatric advanced directives also exist, and somebody might have that in a severe psychotic state. they might not have it on their person, so it might be difficult for us to know. But if we're aware of it, if it's somebody you know and they have an advance directive, it's important to refer to it when you're getting them professional help, because it might say that they want this person in their family to make decisions for them, or it might say they want this hospital versus that hospital, or they want this medication versus that medication. So you can always ask if the person seems untrusting of you, no matter what you're offering and no matter how reassuring you are, you can always ask them if there is someone else they trust that you can call or contact to try to enlist their help. That's always a good tactic. So the keys here are to de-escalate, call for professional help if you need, and if your safety or the safety of others is at risk, definitely get help right away. And I always like to preface this, that these occasions are only in the most severe mental health crises, that not everybody in mental health will get to this state or be aggressive. So if you find out that someone you know has a diagnosis or is on medication, there's a very small population that are going into this kind of a crisis and become aggressive. They're more likely to be vulnerable and victims of crime. Now we're going to quickly end the session with a few minutes of self-care. All right. And by self-care, I'm really talking about the self-help part that we talked about that we want others to do. We're going to take care of ourselves and preserve our own health, right? And improve our own mental and physical health. And especially if we're someone who's caring for others. I use the analogy that a lot of people use of putting the oxygen mask on ourselves and making sure that we know that in certain situations, this might be that we know about ourselves that somebody in that kind of crisis is not someone I can help. I need to call someone else for help if this kind of crisis occurs, because I need to care for myself. I'm not really very good at that, and I'll give you an example. My self-care is that I'm not going to rush out to a scene of an accident where there is someone injured, and especially blood, because the sight of blood is my trigger, correct? So I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to immediately call someone else for help or a professional for help.
Oh, excuse me.
It's okay. So if you experience stress during or after helping the person, it's a typical response, and you're going to need some emotional support yourself if that occurs. It might be, someone who was in crisis, or it was a non-crisis situation, but sometimes that drains us. We're emotionally drained, and we need to remember that it's okay to ask for support and help and talk to someone yourself. So take care of you, and you can better take care of others. So in the course of Mental Health First Aid, we talk about these things that I just flew through today so quickly. We talk about them, and we do exercises, and we show videos, and we really learn more intensely and efficiently about things to do. But I wanted to highlight them for you today because, Holly was saying there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of presentations about addressing the crisis of suicide, which we talked about today, but all these other incidences are not always talked about. And that's why I wanted to kind of condense it. And I hope it wasn't too quick or too much information in 1 hour, but I tried to highlight it for you and let you know that if you're feeling like this could be really helpful to you to take a course, more information is available to you. There are courses on adult, child, or elderly available. There's definitely a focus on different populations. You can visit mentalhealthfirstaid.org to take a course and find it, a local one, and register. There's a whole search engine to use to find one near you. You can also email me or call me. If you want to email me, I can add you to our mailing list. And when I have a course that I do or our agency team of instructors put out there, I usually send that out to my mailing list, and then that gives you an early way to register for it. It also goes on the mentalhealthfirstaid.org website that I have up here, but sometimes it goes out earlier to our email list. So feel free to send me a message to that email and I can add you to my list, or give me a call if you have questions or need more information about any of this. And like I said, I have resources that will, help you in the times of crisis if you want me to send you some websites and phone numbers.
I'm gonna say yes for everybody, Carrie. First and foremost, thank you so much for like you said, you covered a lot of information, but it really was very helpful to first of all get an idea of what the training could be like, and I really do recommend it. I did it back in the days when we met in person, and I understand the trainings are now virtual, which is wonderful. But it really is. We all know what it's like to be in a situation where we don't know what to do to help. It's so much better to have an idea of what to do, which it sounds like usually it's a good idea to stay calm, right?
Right.
To be the duck on the pond, to be calm
Easier,
while the mind.
yes, easier said than done, I know, but if you're feeling uncalm, it's important to take the seconds you need to try to take a deep breath and get others help, feeling like you're alone and not knowing what to do is kind of the most worrisome. And calling for help, whether it be for, professional help or police, or just a friend or another family member, if there's time, if it's not that much of a crisis, that can really help calm yourself. You can be like, okay, help is on the way. If I don't know what to do, it's okay. That's another message we tell first aiders, is that if you don't know what to do, you can always say, this may not be my expertise, but I will try to get the information for you. And it might not be an immediate crisis, but you can assure the person that you'll find more resources for them.
That's great. And Carrie, I will, I put it in the chat, but folks, we will be sharing a video of this presentation. Carrie was kind enough to give us permission to do that. Perhaps we could even pass along your slides if that's okay. Just, you had a lot of, I liked your lists. Your lists were great as far as symptoms and ideas of language and ways to talk to people. I think we can use those across the board in a lot of different circumstances. And any other resource lists that you would like to share, Carrie, I will take and share with our friends on the call.
Great.
It's really this, knowledge is power, right? And I think awareness is huge. And we thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Were there any other questions? We only have about a minute, I see. I see some smiling faces. You got your fan club. Okay, Sharon Kelly, did you have a question or something you'd like to say? You're just you're clapping. That's wonderful. In closing, I just want to remind you folks, this is an opportunity we have every week for family partners, is to come together with an expert on important topics. And we are glad you joined us today. Next week, we will be here with a representative from DAISY, which is a domestic abuse and sexual assault intervention services that are available in Sussex County, because unfortunately, as we know, COVID has really ramped up pressures in homes and in situations that were difficult before COVID. So join us to find out the resources and services that are still being available. And everyone stay healthy, and Family Partners is here for you. Support groups almost every day of the week. And if you have any questions, reach out, but everyone stay healthy.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie. Great job.